All right, let's start. A very good evening to all. Warm welcome and thank you everyone for taking your time to join us this evening. It's now 7 p.m., so we will start our webinar proper. So my name is Haiti. I'm from Saxo Market Singapore, and I'm happy to inform you that the content today is brought to you by Saxo in collaboration with HSBC. And we are very honored to have Kate with us today. She is the Senior Vice President of ETF and Indexing Sales at HSBC. And today's topic is focusing on building a Shariah compliant portfolio. So hopefully by the end of the webinar, it will give everyone some trading ideas and also some trading inspiration. If you have any questions along the way regarding Saxo's platform or the content being shared today, feel free to post them in the chat box at any time because we'll be addressing all the questions at the end of the Q&A webinar. Okay, before we begin, this is the disclaimer that today's content is for your general knowledge and it does not include any financial advice. Please only trade or invest within your own risk appetite. Our webinar will take about 30 to 35 minutes, and this will be the agenda for today's session. I will start off with a quick Saxo Trader Go platform walkthrough, followed by Kate's sharing on the Islamic ETFs offered by HSBC, and then we'll have some time for Q&A afterwards, and then end the session with some closing remarks. And also I'll release the promo code for the commission credits and the dog gifts at the end. So please stay with us until the end. So we'll be releasing the promo code, as I mentioned just now, that you can use to pay for your trades, the commission credits, and also a mixed goodie bag with door gifts from Saxo and HSBC. Okay, so let's start with our quick platform walkthrough. So this is the main page. So for clients who are new to us, you can just go to the URL saxotrader.com, or you can just simply log in to our trading platform from our website. So in the next few minutes, I'll be demonstrating how the details of our platform and also how you can build a diversified portfolio. So first, starting with the main page, the layout divided to 3 main sections and the main headers at the top. So in line with today's presentation on Islamic instruments, so if you're interested, you can log into your platform now if you have an account with us, and you can create a dedicated screener or a watch list together with us. So I have already created one, so I have HSBC Islamic ETFs in my watch list, but if you do not have it, you can just click on new, and you can just create one for yourself. Okay, so once your watch list is created, you can actually find the instrument under the add instrument. For example, HSBC Islamic Europe ESG ETF, and I can just click to add that into the watch list. If not, you can also find under the instrument search bar at the top. Same thing, just search for what you are looking for, and then you can just click the star button to add into the watch list. Of course, not only for ETF, or you can also find other asset classes because Saxo carries a wide range of asset classes on our platform. Okay, also another thing that I would like to share is under the research tab, especially in line with today's topic, research tab, popular themes, you will see there's a curated theme for halal investing by Saxo Strategies. So over here, you can read up more, and you will also see a whole list of instruments that's in line with Sharia investing theme. So that will be an interesting thing for everyone. Okay, so now with a quick understanding of how our platform works, it gives me a great pleasure to welcome Kate from HSBC to share with us today on the topic. So I will now hand over the time to our partner speaker, Kate.
Thanks. Hi, everyone. Thank you all for joining today, and thank you, Saxo, for organizing the session. I'm very excited to be here to speak to you about HSBC's Islamic capabilities to help you build Sharia-compliant portfolios. I think this is a topic that's not frequently discussed, and many people might be surprised to hear that HSBC has such capabilities. So this will be a very brief, yet hopefully informative introduction. So before we get into the details, I want to set the scene by giving you a bit of background. So Muslims today represent nearly 1/4 of the world's population, but less than 1% of the financial assets are actually Sharia compliant. So there seems to be a big disconnect and a gap to be filled. The global Islamic finance industry is worth an estimated 4 trillion as of now, and this number is estimated to rise to 6 trillion by 2026. And in terms of investor demand, what we see in Europe and US with the Muslim populations there are that banks and asset managers are starting to launch Sharia compliant products to fill this gap. And then over here in Asia, so Singapore and neighboring Southeast Asian countries like Malaysia, Indonesia, and Brunei, they have a natural market for Sharia compliant products. And we've seen the demand coming from not only retail, but pension institutions and asset managers as well. The one thing that is interesting, however, is that not all of the investors who invest in Islamic funds are Muslim. And Islamic finance is just another form of ethical investing and can meet the needs of different investor profiles. So, what exactly is Islamic finance? So it's defined as an ethical and equitable mode of finance that's based on the Sharia law, right? So there are actually a few principles that are behind this. A few that I would mention is, first, money is not viewed as an end in itself, but rather it's, a means of exchange, right? So the end goal is really to maximize the welfare for the maximum amount of people in the society. And the second would be to discourage the concentration of wealth in a few hands. And so, risk sharing, that would ensure a more equal risk and profit sharing arrangement between different parties that are involved in the transaction. And then more specifically, if you get into the details, it's important that we rule out certain things. You see these on the slide here. A few to highlight would be things like banning interest or riba. And interest is prohibited because it can create injustice. So, in a transaction, one party is guaranteed a profit because they would gain the interest, whereas the other party would lose out or suffer losses because they're the ones paying the interest, right? And then ban on uncertainty is one. So, transactions involving high risk. So some of the examples here would be things like futures and options contracts, which are used to transact when you're speculating on the future price of something, right? So it's very high level of risk. And then, things like ban of speculation or gambling, of course. And then last but not least, ban on haram activities like, impure food and alcohol products. So these are sort of the, most important concepts, but obviously I can't go through everything today. But, more importantly, how do we apply all of these concepts in practice into our funds, right? So, there are two key screens when it comes to Sharia screening. The first would be the sector screening. So this is where we, exclude the non-permissible areas. So these will be things like gambling, pork, alcohol, etc. And then the second would be a set of accounting screens, right? And this is where we look at a company's capital structure, and then we exclude the companies that are significantly dependent on debt or interest income, right? So this takes us back to the ban on interest. And that's exactly why, banks are also not included in Sharia compliant funds, for example. So this brings me to, talk about HSBC, right? So why should you choose HSBC Asset Management as your Islamic investing partner? First, I want to take a step back and share HSBC's capabilities in terms of their overall passive strategies. So we have been running passive strategies for the past 30 plus years. And then across all of our strategies, including active and passive, HSBC Asset Management runs around $650 billion. And then within the 650 billion, around 120 billion is in the passive strategies. So these are referring to, the index funds and ETFs. And then, more specifically, to touch on HSBC's Sharia infrastructure and, expertise in particular. So we work with an independent Sharia committee that's made up of Islamic scholars. And so, their role is very critical because it's to really make sure that the fund is Sharia compliant, right? So what they're doing is they're monitoring the fund throughout the year. And if they deem the fund to be Sharia compliant, then they would issue an annual Sharia certificate. So, these committee members, these scholars, are the ones that really have a deep understanding and expertise and knowledge, of the Sharia law as it applies to finance. And just to illustrate our track record in this space, our first Islamic fund was actually an index fund that was launched more than 19 years ago. And now it has an AUM of 3.5 billion. So it's really the largest among all of its peers. And, the thing to highlight is that we are pleased to say that we've had absolutely no breaches of Sharia compliance over the, 2 decades of its history. So moving on, before I introduce the Islamic range, I wanted you to just get a glimpse of what HSBC's general capabilities look like in the passive space. So, I would say there are 5 big categories when it comes to our passive solutions. The first here that you see, it's the core solutions, right? So this is, your plain vanilla exposures for both equity and fixed income. The things here would be things like regional or single country exposures and developed market real estate strategies as well. The second would be our sustainable range. So sustainability is another focal point for HSBC as a group. And then within our ETF range, around half of them are sustainability related. And of course, we have our Islamic range in both equity and fixed income. So I'll share this very shortly. And we also have factors. So things like small cap or value or even multi-factor. And then last but not least, thematics. So here it would be something like climate technology, where you get access to companies that are providing tangible climate-focused products and services. So thematics is definitely another area that we are expanding in. Okay, so finally, so HSBC's Islamic strategies. So what exposures can you use to build your Sharia compliant portfolios? So as of now, we have 9 offerings in total. So 6 would fall under equity ETFs and 1 would be Sukuk ETF. We also have 2 unlisted index funds that are global equity and global Sukuk bond. So just in terms of ETFs, we did launch a range of Islamic strategies last year. These are all listed on European stock exchanges, and they can be traded by investors based in Asia. So our goal is really to offer a range of building blocks so that investors can build a Sharia compliant portfolio on their own. So the strategies we have at the moment are world, USA, Europe, and emerging markets. So more recently, we've added two more to this. So Japan as well as property. So, the property strategy is giving you access to real estate companies and REITs worldwide. And then lastly, the Sukuk strategy, which we launched this year. So this is the first Sharia compliant Sukuk kind in the market that's open for global investors to invest in. So, it's a really innovative offering where we're combining the Islamic finance principles with the Western investment practices. And then for those of you who are less familiar, a sukuk can be used as an alternative to conventional bonds because that follows the Sharia law as well. So essentially, it's bond exposure. So all of these strategies that I just mentioned are Sharia compliant, and they have a very, very strict oversight from the Sharia committee to ensure that they are Sharia compliant. And there's definitely more to come here. So keep that in mind. I think that's all I had for today, actually. But just to wrap up, I do want to reiterate that this space of Islamic investments is something that HSBC is very committed to. And we want to work with all of our investors to meet the growing needs. So please do look out for our expanding range. And meanwhile, I'm happy to answer any questions you might have today. Thank you.
Thank you, Kate, for sharing your insights on this sector. So, in fact, very interesting and informative, especially since Sharia investing is on the rise, like you say, and there's also a resilient demand for these Sharia compliant investments. So, for the audience, if you have any pending questions regarding the content on the platform, now is a good time. Please send them in the chat box. I do see a few questions. So, yeah, first question, Kate. Are there any other asset classes besides ETFs that clients can look into in order to get exposure to Sharia compliant investments?
Sure. So I think by that question, I think they're referring to just any other sort of wrappers other than ETFs. Um, I would just share that what HSBC would have is the index funds that I mentioned. So the Global Equity Islamic Index Fund. We also have Sukuk Index Fund in addition to ETFs. And, we've recently launched also a multi-asset fund as well. But just one thing to note that these are not, exchange traded. So only our ETFs are exchange traded, and then these index funds are unlisted.
I see. Okay, thanks, Kate. And then I believe just now you mentioned about who validates if an instrument is Sharia compliant. So so is it the specialist corporate governance team? Like how do they form this team of specialists to validate whether an instrument is Sharia compliant?
Right. So that's a really great question because I think this is the most frequently asked question that we get from investors. So we do work with an independent Sharia committee made up of the Islamic scholars. So they are the ones that validate the funds as Sharia compliant. So for HSBC's case, we have three Islamic scholars on the committee. And like I alluded to earlier, they're really involved in every step of the process of the fund, from the beginning to the very end. And this is taken very, very seriously. And so every year they would issue an annual Sharia certificate. And with that, you know that it is a Sharia compliant fund. So I would just say whether you're looking at HSBC or any other providers out there, one thing to look out for when you are looking at Sharia compliant funds would be this annual Sharia certificate. Because most of the major market players out there would have this, whether it's from their in-house or a third party externally. And in HSBC's case, the certificate can be found in our annual financial statement. So yeah, but so going back to your question, it would be the committee members.
Okay. All right. Yeah. I think the next question is also how and where do the clients find the sheet of these ETFs, these Sharia compliant ETFs? I think the question is they want to see the historical track record. Yeah.
Okay, great. So that's a great question. So, as you know, ETFs are very transparent. And so all of the information regarding ETFs would be public and available to everyone. In HSBC's case, I would just say, so you can Google HSBC ETFs or index funds, and it'll take you to the HSBC page, which has our whole list of ETFs. From there, you can search whatever exposure you're interested in. And then if you click into the documents section of that fund, you can see, all our fact sheets and annual statements and things like that. So that's how you would access the fact sheets to get more details.
I see. Okay. Thanks, Kate. That's very detailed. Yeah. Next question, since we do have some time, can you elaborate more on the ESG versus Sharia screening? Like, what are the differences and similarities between these two?
Mm. Sure. So that's another great question. I think, ESG is something that's also really, on the rise. And I think a lot of investors would be familiar with this. So like I did briefly mention earlier, Islamic finance is one of the many forms of ethical investing, right? So, in HSBC's case, our flagship fund that we launched 20 years ago, that was the Global Equity Index Fund. And we noticed that this fund, continued to grow significantly over the years. So, we were curious as to see what kind of investors were invested in this fund. And it turns out that a lot of the investors invested in this Islamic fund is not Muslim, right? And so, any investor, whether they are Muslim or non-Muslim, can really invest in these Islamic funds. And so some investors may invest in these for religious reasons, or socially responsible reasons, or they just want diversification in their portfolio, or just better performance, right? And so, going back to your question, one thing I didn't mention earlier is that all of our Islamic ETFs, except for one, which is the property one, they do have ESG screening as well. So they're Islamic and ESG screened. And the reason we did this is, several factors, but one is there was investor demand to have this overlay of ESG screening as well. But the second part to that is that, there definitely is an overlap when it comes to ESG screening and Islamic screening, right? So some of the similarities or the overlap would be things like banning tobacco, or controversial weapons, or civilian firearms, right? So these are the similarities and the overlaps. Obviously, Islamic screening on top of that has something like, gambling or alcohol. And then on the ESG side, the difference between ESG, the different thing that ESG screening would have that Islamic screening does not have would be things like thermal coal or oil sands extraction. So things like that, right? So there are differences as well as overlap, between the ESG screening and Sharia screening.
I see. Okay, thank you so much for that. Also, another question is like, what are some of the upcoming new Sharia compliant instruments from HSBC that we can expect in the upcoming days?
Sure. So another good question. Like I said, we're definitely expanding in this space. So we will launch a few more Sharia compliant ETFs next year. One I can share with you would be the Asia Pacific ex Japan ETF. So that really rounds off the building blocks when you're trying to get different exposures to different markets. So the Asia Pacific ex Japan Islamic ETF is coming. Um, but yeah, next year we will have several more. So and we will try to market it as it comes. So please do look out for them in the coming year.
Yeah, hopefully those will be on our trading platform as well. Yeah. Also, I think another last question for you today is for clients who are new to investments in this sector, Sharia compliant instruments, usually how does the time horizon looks like for the investment?
So is that so to understand if I
Like
understand
the
correctly?
time horizon, yeah. How long you usually the clients they invested in the Sharia compliant instruments?
Ah, so, as you can see, I mean, obviously it depends on the type of investor and then, it depends on the individual as well, right? So we
Yeah,
work with, a variety of investors like, pension funds and asset managers and then, retail or private banks, that sort of thing as well. So it depends on the type, but, given the fact that our strategies are very broad-based exposures like, US, world, or Europe, things like that, they would you typically use it more for asset allocation. So those would tend to be sort of mid to long term, just because this is not something that you would do day trading or very
yeah,
short trading, right?
definitely. Yeah.
So I think it would make more sense to have it at least midterm investment horizon on these.
I see. Okay, thank you so much, Kate, for addressing all the questions. Very interesting, and hopefully we answer all the questions from the audience. Yeah. Okay, so back to the my sharing. Okay, so thank you everyone for attending the webinar today. So you can scan the QR code here, as you can see on the screen, to access the recording of this webinar. If you want to rewatch it, it should be available within next 2 to 3 working days. And we also have many other exciting series of upcoming webinars, so feel free to sign up for them. And also another thing I have today is for new clients who do not have a Saxo trading account with us yet. um, Sexo is currently running a welcome promo for all the new clients who doesn't have an account. So as long as you open an account with us by 30th November, we are giving you a welcome offer of $188 commission credits, which you can use to pay for your trades. So please head over to our website for the details. And last but not least, as promised earlier, I would like to end off the webinar by releasing this promo code for the audience to win the goodie bags from Saxo and HSBC. So you can just send in this code to our email ps@saxomarkets.com. So fastest 10 people will receive $20 commission credits and also will walk away with the door gift bag from us. Okay, so this is all we have for this evening. Once again, thank you HSBC team, Kate, for your kind sharing, and thank you to all audience for joining us tonight. And with that, we hope that everybody will have a good week ahead. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye bye.